Commander Keln stood on the observation deck, arms crossed behind his back, watching the smog-choked skyline of New Terra drift beneath the Imperial cruiser. Below, the city simmered with the quiet tension that always followed an occupation. Humans were a peculiar breed, more stubborn than most species the Empire had subdued and dangerously resourceful. Still, the woman was only a civilian. This arrest would be nothing more than a formality. Sergeant Drotha's voice crackled through the comm, "Ground team in position, Commander. Awaiting green light." Keln didn't glance away from the view. "Proceed." He pictured her file in his mind. Elena Cole. 33. Schoolteacher. Born on Terra Prime. A history of minor subversive activity, encrypted messages intercepted, some flagged communications with known resistance cells. Hardly remarkable. Yet command had insisted on her detainment. Thoroughness was a hallmark of the Empire after all. Besides, the sooner she was processed, the sooner Keln could move on to more pressing matters. Lieutenant Vrax lingered nearby, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Keln allowed the silence to stretch, hoping discomfort might encourage better discipline, but Vrax spoke anyway. "Our intel suggests she's operating alone. No confirmed ties to active resistance cells, sir. Probably just passing messages for someone braver." Keln snorted. Bravery has never been a human trait worth noting. She'll break easily. Down on the surface the team moved fast. The residential block was as unassuming as her profile. Narrow streets, aging concrete, the occasional civilian peeking through curtains. Drotha's squad breached the entrance without resistance. No alarms. No last-minute escape attempts. Smooth. Predictable. Inside, Elena Cole sat at her kitchen table as though expecting them. Droth relayed the scene, puzzled. Subject complied immediately. No struggle. No words either. Just waiting. "Doesn't sound like a rebel mastermind," Vrax muttered. Keln turned to him. "Not all threats come with a weapon drawn. Remember that." The arrest was over within minutes. The woman was escorted to the transport, wrists bound in magnetic cuffs, gaze fixed straight ahead. Droth remarked that she hadn't spoken a single word during the entire operation. A rare thing, Keln thought. Humans usually had so much to say when cornered. The cruiser's brig was clean, efficient. Keln observed her through the reinforced glass as Drotha's squad delivered her to the holding cell. Still no words. Still that unnerving calm. Perhaps the silence unnerved Droth too. He lingered just a bit too long outside her cell, as if waiting for her to break the tension with some desperate plea. None came. "Search her residence," Keln ordered. "Top to bottom. No excuses." Vrax raised a brow. "Protocol doesn't." "I don't recall asking for your opinion, Lieutenant." Vrax dipped his head. "Yes, sir." The initial sweep turned up little of interest. Household belongings. Standard electronics. Some encrypted storage drives that might hold data worth decrypting, though Vrax speculated they were likely filled with personal files or financial records. But there was something else. Hidden behind a loose panel beneath the floorboards, Drotha's men recovered a compact military-grade comms unit. Not the sort of device a schoolteacher should have access to. Keln studied the device himself when it arrived on the deck. It was pristine, clearly maintained with care, and still faintly warm to the touch. Whoever she was communicating with, it hadn't been long ago. "Your harmless civilian is full of surprises," Keln said, handing the device off to Vrax. "Get what you can from it." Vrax hesitated as if he wanted to object but thought better of it. "Understood." As the ship ascended from the planet's surface, Keln allowed himself to relax, if only slightly. The arrest was complete. The woman posed no immediate threat, and any secrets she held would reveal themselves under proper interrogation. Still, something about her demeanor lingered at the edges of his thoughts, like a whisper just out of reach. The calmness, the lack of fear, the expectation. "Any word on the husband?" Keln asked. Vrax checked his datapad. "Jackson Cole. Former security contractor, disappeared 6 months ago. Assumed dead or defected. No active records." Keln smirked. Another forgettable human. The thought drifted away as quickly as it came. The woman would break. They always did. And once she did, the Empire would add another small victory to its ever-growing list. There was comfort in the routine of conquest. Comfort in predictability. But in her cell, Elena Cole sat perfectly still, eyes closed, breathing slow and measured. Droth watched her from the hallway, arms folded across his chest, unease flickering in his gaze. He didn't understand why she wasn't afraid. Neither did Keln. Before departing the brig, Keln keyed in the orders for her first interrogation session. He spared one last glance through the glass. If she had any hope of rescue, it was already far too late. After all, who would be foolish enough to challenge an Imperial cruiser? Keln returned to the command deck, already preparing his report for headquarters. Routine. Efficient. Complete. Behind him, somewhere in the cold vacuum of space, a silent transmission pulsed from the comms unit Droth had overlooked on his first sweep. An encrypted signal, brief and direct. Jackson Cole adjusted the worn strap of his rifle across his shoulder as he approached the safe house, eyes scanning every shadow. The city felt different now. Quieter. Too still. The usual background hum of the occupation had been replaced with something heavier: absence. The kind of silence that only settled when something important had been taken. Inside, Lieutenant Marcus Hale waited, seated at a rickety table with a datapad glowing faintly in front of him. He didn't need to speak. The grim set of his jaw said enough. When? Jackson asked, voice low. Hale tapped the screen twice, bringing up the report. 3 hours ago. Imperial strike team. Went straight for your place, no hesitation. No comm chatter. No demands. Just snatched her. Jackson nodded once, slowly, as if his body had to process the information before his mind allowed itself the weight of it. He clenched his jaw until his teeth ached. Alive. Hale shrugged. Far as we know. Transported to orbit. Cruiser designation Harbinger. Standard holding procedures, but he didn't finish. He didn't need to. Jackson set his rifle down and leaned over the table. Tell me what you have. Hale's fingers danced across the datapad. A holographic projection of the cruiser appeared between them, its angular hull rotating silently. Small garrison. Officer in charge is Commander Keln. Notorious for his efficiency. His file reads like a graveyard. And security? Locked tighter than a drum. You won't be sneaking aboard with a smile and a forged ID. You'll need heavy misdirection or some sort of miracle. Jackson stared at the model of the ship as it turned slowly in the air. His gaze wasn't fixed on its defenses or the access points. He was thinking about her. Elena had always known this day could come. She'd married a SEAL with full understanding of what that meant. The risk wasn't theoretical. But neither was his promise to protect her, no matter what uniform tried to get in his way. She didn't resist, Hale continued, almost apologetic. From what we heard, she didn't say a word. Like she was waiting. She was, Jackson said, his voice like gravel. She knew I'd come. For a long moment, neither man spoke. The room's stale air pressed against them like a third presence, heavy and patient. Jackson's mind shifted into the only mode it knew when the odds tilted from bad to impossible: problem solving. We're going to need help, he said. Hale's mouth twitched into the faintest hint of a grin. Reyes. Jackson nodded. Reyes. They moved fast. Time wasn't a resource they had in abundance. Captain Reyes was waiting for them in an abandoned factory 2 blocks from the old shipping district. A scar ran down the side of his neck, the kind of wound that didn't heal properly in the outer colonies. He greeted Jackson with a firm grip and no unnecessary words. You've got an hour before that cruiser breaks orbit, Reyes said, leading them deeper into the building. And I don't have to tell you what happens to her after that. You don't, Jackson replied. Reyes gestured to a terminal against the wall. A schematic of the Harbinger blinked onto the display, marked with key structural weaknesses and updated patrol routes. I can get you into their cargo bay. Automated loading systems mean light oversight. But after that, you're on your own. This isn't a rescue. It's a suicide run. Jackson barely blinked. It's neither. It's personal. Reyes gave him a look, half admiration, half pity. Empire doesn't lose these kinds of fights. They haven't fought me yet. Hale checked his watch. 47 minutes. Jackson glanced over the schematics one last time, committing every detail to memory. He didn't need a team. He didn't need backup. He needed to move quickly, hit hard, and not stop until he had her out. She's not just cargo to them, Hale said quietly. They'll figure out who she is. Who you are. Jackson buckled his vest, checking each mag, each knife, each charge. His hands moved from muscle memory. Then they'll regret finding out. Reyes stepped back, arms folded. Last chance to walk away. Jackson met his eyes. Last chance for them. The room went silent again, that same heavy, expectant pause before the drop. They all knew the odds. A single man against a cruiser. A husband against the Empire. It didn't make sense on paper, but none of that mattered. She's alive, Jackson said, almost to himself. And if she's alive, then nothing else is. Hale grabbed his rifle and slung it over his shoulder. Let's make some noise. Jackson looked at the time. 44 minutes. In less than an hour he would be aboard the Harbinger. He wasn't sure how many Imperials would stand between him and Elena, but it didn't matter. They were only obstacles. Temporary ones. The Empire had made a mistake. They thought they could steal a woman from her home, drag her into orbit and process her like inventory. They hadn't considered who might come looking. That was their first mistake. It would also be their last. Jackson moved like a shadow through the underbelly of the Harbinger. The cargo bay had been as unguarded as Reyes promised, but that was where the easy part ended. Beyond the crates and steel corridors, the Imperial machine pulsed with discipline and numbers, and none of it mattered. He wasn't here for survival. He was here for extraction. One objective. One target. Everything else was collateral. The first sentry died without a sound. Jackson's knife slid cleanly beneath the man's chin, his body eased to the floor before his comm could chirp. Jackson took the earpiece and slid it into his ear. The channel crackled with routine chatter, patrol shifts, maintenance requests, the dull hum of arrogance. These people believed they were safe. They believed they were untouchable. Jackson advanced, checking corners, his pulse steady. He'd mapped the ship during the briefing, but nothing beat real-time adaptation. 2 guards at the junction ahead. One leaned against the wall, the other pacing. Jackson waited for the perfect moment, then struck. 2 quick shots, suppressed and precise. They hit the floor in tandem and he dragged the bodies into a maintenance hatch. Still no alarms. Still no suspicion. He moved upward toward the detention block where Elena would be held. The air changed as he climbed, becoming colder, cleaner. Less traffic. More control. The Empire's sense of superiority was palpable in the architecture. Every corridor was wide, sterile, designed to make prisoners feel small. It didn't work on him. He wasn't a prisoner. He was the reckoning. Lieutenant Vrax was pacing in the command room when the first irregularities appeared on his monitor. Isolated power surges. Dead comms from routine patrols. He tapped through the reports with growing unease. On any other day these could be dismissed as system glitches. But something gnawed at him, an instinct sharpened by fear. Commander Keln, Vrax said over the internal channel, his voice tight, "We may have a situation." Keln's reply came bored and lazy. "Then handle it, Lieutenant." Vrax almost argued, but the words died in his throat. He turned back to his screen and ordered a double sweep of the lower decks. Too little, too late. Jackson heard the shift in guard patterns before he saw it. The sudden urgency in footsteps. The clipped voices over comms. They were starting to realize something was wrong, but they were still chasing ghosts. He stayed ahead of them, weaving through maintenance shafts and bypassing scanners. Every movement was calculated. Every breath measured. At the brig entrance, 4 guards manned the checkpoint. Jackson assessed the cover options, the angles of approach, the sequence of shots required to clear the room before anyone could sound an alarm. He moved. The first man dropped with a shot through the eye. The second turned just in time to catch a blade between the ribs. The last 2 scrambled for their weapons, but Jackson was faster. 3 seconds. For bodies on the ground. The door to the detention block slid open under stolen credentials, and he stepped inside. She was there. Elena sat on the cell bench, hands cuffed, head bowed. At the sound of the door, she looked up, and for the first time in hours, something like life flickered in her eyes. "Took you long enough," she said. Jackson keyed the cell open and pulled her to her feet. "You ready?" She nodded. No questions. No fear. Just trust. He freed her wrists, handed her a sidearm, and they moved. The exfiltration was never meant to be clean. Keln finally decided to pay attention when the alarms blared across the ship, and by then Jackson and Elena were already halfway to the hangar. "Get me a visual." Keln snapped, storming onto the bridge. "Who the hell is doing this?" Vrax pulled up the feed from the brig hallway. The camera caught a glimpse of Jackson, his face half-lit by muzzle flash as he dispatched another squad. Vrax paled. "Sir, I think that's him." Keln squinted at the screen. "Who?" "Her husband." Keln stared a moment longer, watching as Jackson reloaded with practiced ease and kept moving. There was no hesitation in him. No fear. Just a straight line from problem to solution, leaving bodies in his wake. "Activate the failsafes," Keln ordered. "Seal the hangar. Vent the cargo decks if you have to. I want him dead." They threw everything they had into stopping him. Automated turrets came online. Bulkheads slammed shut. Fire teams converged from every direction. Jackson never slowed. Every obstacle was a problem to be solved, and he solved them with bullets, blades, and explosives. Elena moved beside him, keeping pace, covering angles. For all the Empire's superiority, they couldn't match the simplicity of purpose. 2 people. 1 mission. Get out. They reached the hangar as the blast doors began to close. Jackson shoved Elena through the shuttle's hatch and spun to cover her. He dropped 3 more Imperials before diving in after her. The engines screamed as they fired, the shuttle tearing free from its restraints just as the bay sealed behind them. In the distance, the Harbinger hung in the void, a silent titan, wounded but alive. For now. Elena sat across from him in the narrow cabin, hair matted, eyes tired but bright. You came, she said softly. Always, Jackson replied. Behind them, the ship grew smaller, and the comm crackled with the first static of pursuing fighters. Jackson checked the NAV, adjusted course and prepared for the next fight. This wasn't over. But now they knew who he was.